They saw an elderly black woman, alone on her ranch. An easy target. But they didn't see the calloused hands of a warrior, or the ghosts of 100 battles in her eyes. They came to take her land. The first man who came to take Anya Sharma's land wore a smile as polished as his city boots. He called himself Cal Briggs, a representative of some vague corporate entity, and he spoke of legacy and transition as he stood on the gravel of her long driveway. Anya, a 65-year-old retired command sergeant major, listened from her porch, her face unreadable. He saw a solitary black woman on a dusty ranch. She saw a forward scout testing her defenses. He spoke of her late husband, also a veteran, and the burden of managing so much land alone. He left a glossy envelope with a generous offer on the railing. Anya didn't touch it until his pristine SUV was a speck on the horizon. That evening, she fed the offer to her iron stove, watching the paper curl into black ash. A line had been crossed. The pressure escalated with military predictability. A slashed tire on her truck, discovered after a rainstorm that conveniently washed away most of the footprints. A burst water line, snipped cleanly by something sharp. Then, the poisoning of her oldest goat, its body found bloated by the fence line. Each act was a message, a form of psychological warfare she knew all too well. They were designed to make her feel isolated, vulnerable, and afraid. Anya recorded each incident in a logbook with cold precision. She didn't call the sheriff's office, she knew Sheriff Cobb was part of the same rot. Instead, she began her own preparations. The men in tailored suits thought they were escalating a business negotiation. They had no idea they were provoking a war with a ghost. Anya Sharma, known in circles they couldn't imagine as Nightshade, was simply refamiliarizing herself with the battlefield she called home. Anya didn't just set traps, she re-established a defensive perimeter. The ranch, to an untrained eye, looked the same. To a soldier, it was being transformed. She spent 3 days walking the 72 acres, not as a rancher, but as an operator planning a mission. Her first task was surveillance. She placed small, solar-powered motion-activated cameras in the hollows of old oak trees and along the fence lines, feeding a silent video stream to a ruggedized laptop in her storm cellar. She knew her enemy would be doing the same, and on the second day, she found their scout cam, a professional-grade device hidden high in a pine tree. She didn't just destroy it, she rewired its transmitter, looping footage of a serene, empty field from 2 days prior. If they were watching, they would now be blind. Next came the early warning systems. Using skills honed in places where an unexpected footstep meant death, she rigged non-lethal alarms. Tripwires made from fine fishing line were connected to small, buried chimes near the main approaches. A pressure plate under a loose-fitting stone on the path to her barn was wired to a silent vibrator under her floorboards. These weren't designed to maim, but to inform. They were the whispers that would tell her where the enemy was, long before they knew she was aware. Finally, she prepared her fields of fire. She cleared brush around 3 key elevated positions, the hayloft of her barn, the roof of the old pump house, and a rocky outcrop overlooking the main road. Each position offered interlocking fields of fire, ensuring no approach was left uncovered. In each nest, she stashed water, a small medical kit, and ammunition. She wasn't just planning to fight, she was planning to win. The entire ranch became a layered defense system, a silent, deadly web waiting for the clumsy approach of overconfident men. They thought they were coming for an old woman. They were walking into a kill zone designed by a ghost. They came after midnight, 3 dark trucks rolling up the road with their headlights off. Anya watched them on her monitor from the hayloft, counting them as they disembarked. 9 men, clad in black tactical gear, moving with the practiced efficiency of hired muscle. They fanned out, expecting to intimidate, to overwhelm. They thought they were the hunters. Anya exhaled slowly, her cheek pressed against the cold stock of her rifle. The first vibration from a tripwire near the west fence confirmed their path. She waited. Let them commit. When the lead man stepped into the open pasture, she squeezed the trigger. The sound was a sharp crack, swallowed by the vastness of the night. The man folded silently into the grass. The others didn't notice for a full 7 seconds. When they finally did, Chaos was their commander. A second shot took down another man, this one near the gate. Panic erupted. They scattered for cover, firing blindly into the darkness. Anya was already moving. She slid from the hayloft, a shadow moving along a pre-cleared irrigation ditch, her movements silent and fluid. They were shouting now, their voices tight with fear, trying to find the source of the attack. They assumed a static sniper position. They were wrong. From her second nest behind the old pump house, she targeted the men trying to flank the barn. A third went down with a shot to the knee, his cry a sharp beacon in the night. They were trained, but for a different kind of war. They were trained to fight insurgents, not to be hunted by a ghost on her own turf. She used their own tactics against them, firing a single shot and then melting back into the shadows, letting the silence and their own fear do most of the work. One of the teams near the house finally breached the back door, splintering the frame with a battering ram. It was a foolish, noisy move. Anya, having circled back through the darkness, was waiting inside. The first man through the door was met not with a bullet, but with a repurposed fire extinguisher, its thick chemical cloud blinding him instantly. As his partner rushed in, he tripped a wire she had strung at shin height, sending him sprawling. The fight inside was close, brutal, and short. Anya moved with an economy of motion that belied her age, using the tight confines of her home as a weapon. A strike to a nerve cluster, a joint lock, the hard butt of her pistol used with surgical precision. It was over in minutes. 3 men down, disabled but alive, their arrogance extinguished in the familiar darkness of her home. The war had come to her door, and she had answered. By dawn, the battle was over. 5 of the mercenaries were down in the fields, incapacitated with non-lethal but disabling wounds. 4 had made it inside the house. Of those, Anya had left one conscious, Cal Briggs. She didn't take him to the house. She dragged him to the barn, his hands bound with zip ties. The barn was cool and smelled of hay and old iron. She sat him in a sturdy wooden chair in the center of the floor, under a single, bare light bulb. She didn't speak. She just sat across from him on an overturned bucket, cleaning her rifle with slow, methodical strokes. The quiet clicks of the metal parts sliding back into place were the only sounds. An hour passed. Then 2. She offered him water, which he refused. Finally, his composure cracked. "What do you want?" he rasped, his voice raw. Anya paused, looking up from her work. "I want the name of the man who signs your checks. I want the name of the clerk at the county office who stalled my paperwork. And I want the name of the sheriff who told you my land was an easy target." Cal scoffed. "You think I'll talk?" Anya didn't reply. Instead, she pulled a small, rugged tablet from her pocket and pressed play. It was audio from the raid. The screams of his men. His own voice, tight with panic, shouting into a dead radio. She had jammed their communications from the start. "Your employers think you're all dead or missing," she said calmly. "They have no idea you're here. They've already written you off. But the feds, when they eventually get here, they'll be very interested in what you have to say. Especially when I give them this recording." She let the silence hang in the air. "Or," she continued, "you can tell me. You can give me the structure, the names. You can be the man who brought the whole thing down. Your choice." She watched the calculation in his eyes, the slow erosion of his professional pride. He was a middleman, a disposable asset. He knew it. She knew it. By the time the sun was high in the sky, Cal Briggs was no longer a corporate enforcer. He was Anya Sharma's first witness. Cal's confession confirmed what Anya had long suspected. The man pulling the strings from the shadows was Sheriff Cobb, a man whose folksy public persona masked a deep network of corruption. But it was something else Cal said that turned the fight from one of defense to one of vengeance. "Your husband, he was the original problem," Cal admitted, his voice low. He knew about the gas deposits years ago. He kept filing geological surveys that disputed the company's claims, using his old Army Corps of Engineers credentials to tie it all up in bureaucratic knots. He was costing them millions. The air in the barn grew cold. Anya's face remained a mask of stone, but her hands, resting on her knees, tightened into fists. "The car accident," she said, her voice flat. "It wasn't a question." Cal hesitated, then nodded. "It was meant to look clean." Cobb was the first on the scene. He handled the report himself. "With your husband gone, they thought the roadblock was cleared. They just had to wait for the land to pass to you, assuming you'd be easier to persuade." The pieces clicked into place, sharp and painful. Her husband, David, hadn't died because of faulty brakes. He had been murdered. Murdered by the same corrupt network that now wanted his land. This was never just about mineral rights. It was about silencing the man who stood in their way, and erasing his legacy by taking the very ground he had sworn to protect. That night, Anya didn't sleep. She sat at her husband's old desk, a single lamp illuminating a hidden compartment under the floorboards. Inside was his legacy, a series of coded journals and a military-grade encrypted hard drive. For years, she had respected his privacy, assuming they held memories of a war he preferred to forget. Now, she knew they were his last will and testament. They were his final mission brief. Using a cipher they had developed together decades ago, she began the slow, painful work of decoding his final message, his final fight. The battle for the ranch was over. The war for his name had just begun. The intelligence on her husband's drive was a roadmap to the conspiracy. It contained names, hidden LLCs, and offshore bank transfers, all connecting Sheriff Cobb to the corporation trying to seize her land. It was a weapon, but Anya knew a weapon was useless without someone who knew how to wield it in the right arena. She needed a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, but a warrior of a different kind. She made a call to Mariah Knox, a sharp, fearless attorney who had made a name for herself by taking on corrupt corporations that preyed on rural landowners. Anya had followed her work for years. "Ms. Knox," Anya said, her voice steady over the phone. "My name is Anya Sharma. You and I need to talk about Sheriff Cobb and Green Horizon LLC." There was a pause on the other end, then a sharp intake of breath. "I've been investigating Green Horizon for 6 months, Mariah said, her voice a mix of shock and excitement. "They're ghosts. I could never find a direct link to the muscle they use on the ground." "I have the link," Anya replied calmly. "I have him tied up in my barn. And I have his full confession on tape." The silence on the line was profound. The next day, Mariah's car, a sensible sedan that looked out of place on the dusty ranch road, pulled up to the house. The two women met on the porch. Anya, the aging soldier, weathered and resolute. Mariah, the young lawyer, sharp, energetic, and dressed in a suit that was its own kind of armor. They were from different worlds, different generations, but they recognized the same fire in each other's eyes. Anya laid out everything, the confession, her husband's coded files, the evidence from the raid. Mariah listened, her expression growing more focused with every detail. She saw the legal pathways, the pressure points, the way to turn Anya's tactical victory into a legal checkmate. "They underestimated you," Mariah said, looking over the documents. "That was their first mistake," Anya replied. "My job," Mariah said, a determined glint in her eye, "is to make sure it's their last." The alliance was forged. The warrior and the lawyer, united against a common enemy. The legal assault was as swift and devastating as Anya's physical defense of her ranch. Acting on the irrefutable evidence provided by Anya, Mariah Knox bypassed the compromised local courts and went straight to the feds. She filed a sweeping racketeering lawsuit, naming Sheriff Cobb, Cal Briggs, and the parent corporation, Green Horizon, as co-conspirators. Anya's audio of Cal's confession was the linchpin. Paired with her late husband's meticulous files, it created an undeniable narrative of corruption, conspiracy, and murder. The federal response was decisive. A pre-dawn raid, coordinated by the FBI, targeted Sheriff Cobb's office and the homes of his key accomplices. They found Cobb trying to shred documents, his face a mask of disbelief. The folksy, untouchable sheriff was led away in handcuffs, his reign of corruption over. The news sent shockwaves through the state. The story of the "Ghost of the Ranch" became a legend, a cautionary tale for corporate predators and a symbol of resilience for those who had been overlooked. But Anya stayed out of the spotlight. She gave her deposition to the federal investigators from her own kitchen table, her testimony concise and damning. When the indictments came down, the entire network crumbled. Cal Briggs, facing decades in prison, became the prosecution's star witness, his testimony securing convictions up and down the chain of command. The corporation, facing ruinous lawsuits and federal investigation, declared bankruptcy. The final victory came in a quiet, civil court ruling. The judge not only reaffirmed Anya's ownership of her land and mineral rights but, citing the extreme circumstances, placed the property under a permanent protective trust, shielding it from any future corporate or government seizure. The land was safe. Her husband's legacy was secure. Checkmate. With the legal battles won and the ghosts of the past laid to rest, a new kind of silence settled over the ranch. It was a silence not of tension, but of peace. But Anya Sharma was not a woman built for idleness. The warrior's spirit needed a mission. She used the settlement funds from the lawsuit not for herself, but to transform her ranch. The old barn, the scene of the final confrontation, was converted into a clean, modern training facility. The fields where she had once laid traps were turned into obstacle courses and shooting ranges. Her ranch became The Watch, a private, unofficial sanctuary for female veterans. It was a place for women who, like her, had served in the shadows and returned to a world that didn't understand their scars or their strength. They came to heal, to train, to find camaraderie, and to learn from the legendary Nightshade herself. The final scene of the story finds Anya on a ridge overlooking the ranch at dusk. She isn't alone. Beside her stands a young female veteran, a former Marine, peering through a spotting scope. Anya is coaching her, her voice low and steady, pointing out the subtle shifts in the wind, the way the light plays on the distant hills. The fight isn't over when you come home, Anya tells the young woman, her eyes on the horizon. It just changes form. Our job isn't to stop fighting. It's to choose the right battles, and to make sure we're always watching over our own. Anya was no longer a lone ghost. She was a guardian, a mentor, the command sergeant major of a new, unofficial unit. Her watch had not ended. It had been passed on. True strength isn't just fighting your own battles, but building a place where others can heal from theirs. Who is your sister in arms? Tag them or share this story and comment Sisterhood to honor the unbreakable bond. Subscribe for more.